Namaskar. After a long time after festival, we are again with Kritya. Thank to Vinita Agrawal and Sukrita Pal Singh who made me come again in this stage. And they are here with a very beautiful, very interesting and very important theme the about the poetry in the market. So I invite um, Sukrita, Vinita, and their guest, Dibyajyoti and Kanishka.
Thank you very much, Rati. It's such a pleasure, and we are very, very grateful that you have provided this platform to us, because Kritya is serving the cause of poetry in a very big way through, a number of festivals that you organize and get people together, writing poetry, listening to poetry from all over the world. Thank you very much for giving us this platform for what Vinita and I call ruminating poetry. The whole idea is, and I will just very quickly mention why did we set this up with you. One, because we wanted genuine people to get associated with this, and so that we could ruminate on poetry. And the whole idea of doing that is basically coming from the fact that there is a lot of poetry that gets written and a lot of poetry that gets even recited, but there isn't adequate conversation on poetry. There isn't adequate conversation in the context of critical perceptions, nor is there much of a conversation on how are we receiving good poetry or not so good poetry, and what are the criteria for looking at poetry. We are not talking about this at all. And so this is towards starting a conversation on poetry in the popular domain. And so we're basically looking at we've had several sessions. We've had sessions on gender, etc., which have to do with, and we normally get two poet guests with us. This time we thought that we need to actually talk about a very crucial subject, which is poetry in the market. Now, poetry in the market by itself, it seems like an oxymoron. I mean, poetry and market, are we talking about these two together? Isn't that very strange? But no, it's not strange, because most of the poetry that we are seeing that gets published is out, well, if it depends, we'll come out with this as to who is publishing poetry. Publishing poetry in itself has become a very creative art for people who have passion for poetry. So but then again, we are looking at mainstream publishers, and we are looking at not mainstream, but people who are doing it as labor of love. And so we have somebody like Dibyajyoti Sarma here, who is actually Red River. And Red River is doing poetry which is purely a labor of love. We do not know who is to take it to market, but taking it to the market is one thing. But yes, unpublished poetry, we believe, Kanishka, you are taking it to the market and you also do it. Of course, there is money involved in that, but there is also a question of, are you able to sell it? I know your forte is fiction, but to what extent are you able to make a dent or not? That is also a point to be considered. So there are various aspects of this entire theme, poetry in the market, that need to be engaged with these dimensions, which sometimes discourage young poets or not very well known poets but writing very good poetry. Where do they go? How does poetry get published? What is the standard answer that you get from publishers? Oh, it doesn't sell, so we can't publish it. Standard answer. But how are we going to create market? Can we create market for it? If a publisher has to also take the onus of creating readers, it becomes very, very challenging. So these are many things that we need to really talk about, because we know that Indians writing in English in our part of the world and even outside of our country, Indians, they are writing. More and more poetry is being written, and less and less of publishers are getting into the domain of publishing. So I think that is the broad area. Of course, we will go into a very interactive session very soon, but we also know that we have very important people who are dealing with this subject in their own domain, individual domains. One is Dibyajyoti Sarma and the other is Kanishka Gupta. And I would request Vinita to introduce them before we get into a discussion.
Thank you, Sukrita, for that lovely introduction to our session. And Sukrita and I were discussing this session briefly in the afternoon, and we could tell that this is going to be an extremely stimulating and extremely vibrant kind of a discussion. And I assure you that a lot of the audience today is interested in this, because they are facing this reality of the commerce of poetry and poetry in the market, and how difficult it is to publish poetry, and why is poetry taken seriously abroad, why is other language poetry in India doing well but not English poetry, Anglophone poetry. These are all issues that we need to discuss and sort of throw up in the course of this discussion. So before diving into that, I would like to introduce our very eminent panelists for today, Dibyajyoti Sarma and Kanishka Gupta. Poet, writer and translator Dibyajyoti Sarma, who calls himself an accidental publisher, runs the independent poetry publishing outfit Red River from his bedroom in Delhi. Established in 2017, Red River has so far published 50 plus titles to varying degrees of success. Red River believes that art cannot be commodified. We survive by being rare, being unique. Very brave words, Dibya.
Thank you.
To introduce Kanishka Gupta. Kanishka is a literary agent, writer and publishing commentator, best known for his ongoing series for Scroll.in called Publishing and the Pandemic. He is the founder of Writer's Side, the largest literary agency and consultancy in South Asia. He has been credited for single-handedly popularizing literary representation in the subcontinent. His first novel was longlisted for the Asian Booker Prize in 2009 and was published in 2010. May I now request Dibya to give us a heads up on this topic, on this very vibrant and important topic of poetry in the market. Dibya, over to you.
Thank you for inviting. I am not sure what I'm going to say. I was thinking about what I'm going to say about Red River. How do you introduce Red River? And usually I tell people Red River is an independent press. But then I did some thinking and realized that Red River is not really an independent press. If somebody like Speaking Tiger or LF is an independent press, or if say Poetry Wala is an independent press, compared to that, Red River is not an independent press. It is under independent press, because there is no one except for me. So I'm handling everything from commissioning to editing to designing to marketing to selling. So I don't know how to describe it, but it's a say a cottage press. It's a cottage industry.
You're using a partnership model now. I mean, Dibya, you're using a
Not
partnership model, right?
Not necessarily, not
Okay.
always.
Okay.
I mean, in most cases, yes, but not always. So I cannot define that also, because
I was
then
happy to see all your books on Amazon, though, and the latest anthology that you've put out, edited by Nabina Das, is top 20 on Amazon in the poetry category. The only book
I
published
can
by an
explain you
independent.
why.
Huh?
I can explain you why for that.
Okay.
See,
Okay.
traditionally, what happens when you do an anthology, the idea is that, like, poetry, you don't make a payment. If you're a small press, you don't make a payment, but you offer the poets, the contributors, a gratis copy. This anthology became so big that we could not afford to give a gratis copy.
Okay.
I mean, like, Vinita is there, Sukrita is there, Ratiz is there, so they would understand the situation. They would know we wrote a wrong mail explaining why we could not offer a gratis copy. So what happened is a lot of poets who are in the book, they purchased the book, and that is
Okay.
why it went up. So compared
Okay.
to that, I put an example. Before that, we did another anthology, the Red River Book of Erotic Poetry. So there, say there are 57 poets from India, and we gave gratis copies to them. And the book sold so far. Book has sold 50 copies,
Okay.
just 50 copies. So so how do I explain myself? So when it comes to market, it's a very odd situation because I want to compete with the big players, but yet I don't have the resources. So what we have to do, we have to, like, within the thing, whatever we can control the quality, we can control the quality of the books we publish, we can control the text. That we are trying to do. We cannot control the market because it's a branding is very important, and we don't have any branding issues. So what you see is in Facebook is doesn't matter, but it's like, the readership outside, because when people go to a bookstore, they will pick up a book by a Penguin. They will say, okay, this is a good book because it's being published by Penguin. But if you don't know Red River yet, they won't pick up the book even if it is a good book. So in short, we are happy if we can sell 100 copies of a book, and we are satisfied with that, and we have been able to do that. What else do I say? uh, Basically the idea is to be there and do something because nobody else is doing. Another thing I'm realizing it, I mean, I was thinking about it, like, recently I have been seeing a lot of chatter about Red River in Facebook. I'm scared to go to Facebook these days because of that. And I'm realizing why people are talking about Red River. And I realize there are quite a few poetry publishers or publishers who publish good number of poetry titles in a year, but they are not promoting their books enough. So we do very little, but we do it constantly, and that is why there is a visibility happening, which is important. And I think that's
We'd
about,
like
like,
to hear from you also.
For me,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So I bring bad news because what has happened during the COVID is that publishers who used to be doing like poetry books, and I'm talking about contemporary poetry, new poetry, they are cutting down on their lists. So and they are also like doing 2 or 3 collections in a year. So many of them are like booked up till like 23, 24, and I'm talking about the top mainstream MNCs. And on the other hand, like some other bigger publisher, bigger in terms of the number of books they are publishing in a year, who are always wary of like publishing new like contemporary poets. I mean, they are just not going to do any poetry collections, is my feeling. So before COVID, I think in 2020, from 2017 to 2020, I was doing at least 2 to 3 collections in a year. At least 2 of them were like contemporary poets, like poetry collections, and one was like a translation. So like we did Arjun Rajendran Manjari's book. There was this Kuvar Narayan's collection, translated by the Sun. But now I can't even consider poetry because publishers are not going to take it on. And So that's what has happened in the poetry space. So I personally feel that we need to look at alternatives, and there are alternatives. So some very good things have happened during the COVID. I mean, this quarantine train, which is a community of like poets and writers set up by founded by Arjun Rajendran. It's doing well. They also instituted a prize, like a poetry prize in the memory of Dipankar Khilwani, and so that's there. And then Hemant Devate, I mean, he set up this poetry wala foundation, again like a community of like-minded people. So I think what one needs to do is to like make these alternatives stronger, more sustainable, because I don't see mainstream publishers taking on too many contemporary poetry volumes, because I mean they tried a lot. I mean during COVID also they published anthologies. They published some poets like contemporary poets with massive Insta following. I'm talking about like over 50,000 on Insta, maybe even 100,000, but it just doesn't translate into sales. So I have a theory. I think many non-serious poetry readers, they don't want to read poems in a book form. I mean, they'd be happy to read the poetry on social media, on Insta, and even like poetry being performed on YouTube, because otherwise one cannot understand why a poem or poetry or a poet that has gone viral on social media. And just let's leave Rupi Kaur aside, because she's a global phenomenon. She will sell everywhere. Like maybe someone who's got like 200,000 views or 300,000 views on social media, and their book is published by a Penguin or a Harper, it doesn't sell more than 2,000 copies, sometimes even less than that. I have seen the same thing with anthologies. I have agented some anthologies. Some of them, like, came out during COVID. I mean, the list of contributors is like phenomenal. It's global, but I mean, and they also generate a lot of attention. There are conversations, there are talks, there are reviews, but I mean, one doesn't see sales beyond a certain number. And now what the MNCs are going to do, the multinational publishers, they are probably going to cut down the lists and do books with larger print runs. So they will cut down the list, and then maybe look at like books in the literary space that can like that can be like can have a print run of a 5,000 as opposed to like a 3,000 or a 2,000. um, but we need to strengthen like the alternative, the poetry, the ecosystem, like something like looking for donors, looking for funding. Look at like the Poetry Foundation that got a massive donation, I think grant, I think many years ago, like $200 million. They have a magazine, they have they have instituted prizes, and I see like Poetry Wala Foundation aspiring to do something similar, because they want to conduct workshops, they want to institute prizes. They have plans to do a prize for English poetry in translation. So you end up identifying talent, you nurture the talent, then you publish the talent, and then you promote the talent. So similarly, Shikha Saklani, Malvia, and some other poets, they set up, I think they set up this poetry,
The
Great
Great
Indian
Indian
Poetry Collective. Again,
Yeah.
excellent selection. They use that award model. It's like a mentorship model. So the prize, one of the incentives is publication, and the selection is very good. One of like Rohan Chetri, Urvashi Bhoguna, or top contemporary poets. So I think that is what needs to be done, because I have received like 8 or 10 poetry manuscripts in the last 2 or 3 months. Some of them are like very promising poets. They have won major prizes, but I can't take it on, because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not a publisher, and I have to sell it to like publishers, and their lists are full. So the ones who are interested in poetry, they're booked up till 24, 23, because they cannot publish more than two or three books in a year. And the ones who were always wary of contemporary poetry in English or in translation, because they're more or less the same, the sales figures, they are not going to touch poetry. So, for instance, last year, I'll tell you the top 5 selling names, top 5 selling poetry collection. There are 2 volumes by Kumar Vishwas. There is Madhushala by Harivansh Rai Bachchan. There is The Essential Rumi, and I think there is one Rupi Kaur book. But we don't have like contemporary poets in the top 100.
Right.
But would
So
you say, I don't know, Dibya, if you and both Kanishka and you feel that, do you think there is a kind of a dearth of writing on poetry, which can make it popular? Do you think that the identification that used to happen by the critics or by the academics, they would write, they would also get these things prescribed immediately. And the moment a book is prescribed, immediately there is a sale, and the
yeah, that
popularity
happens.
comes
That
from
happens. That
there.
happens.
But do you think that there is a lack of all that? Because see, ultimately, we have to ruminate poetry. We have to internalize. We need to not just see, or does it have something to do with the way social media is functioning, which is that it's one-off thing. Okay, I very quickly read it and press the button, like,
Yeah.
love, whatever, and that's it. But there isn't there is not any guarantee that there is internalizing of that particular poem, or has the poem been read or not, even that is not sure.
So
So
Sukrita,
what I'm saying, hmm,
go on, go on.
yeah, so what I'm saying is that if you're saying, okay, we need to create all these systems, so that support system is worked out as to how this is a huge issue. How do we how do we make the person read poetry, particularly people who are propagating the idea of poetry? They're not reading they're not reading, or are they reading only whatever they get free? What is happening? So it's something to be pondering about. Where are we missing out? Is it that
No, no,
internalization process?
I feel poetry is being read, but like new readers or readers who are like not very familiar with poetry, or who are not serious poetry reader but want to like maybe give it a shot, they are not reading it in a book form, is what I'm saying. Because I mean, in the last 2 years there have been two or three poets who have a massive following on social media, like I said before, and they came out with books, and the books haven't sold at all. You know, and when you talk about like serious criticism or like reviews, review culture around poetry, I mean we do have that. I mean there's this poet and writer Uttaran Das Gupta who has a column on poetry, and poetry gets covered regularly in HT, Mint, and even other publication. But I mean, even uh, reviews don't have much of an impact on even literary fiction or any kind of fiction. They are no longer the major influencers. Like like India Today talking about an Adrian Levy book, and Kathy Scott Clark book, about these operations, terror operations that will take the book on Amazon top 100, like break into the Amazon top 100. But I don't think reviews anywhere for any kind of writing have that sort of an impact. I mean, this is my experience.
Divya, why are you publishing then? Why are you publishing?
See, my idea of publishing is to make the book available. It's not the readership, because that is something that I cannot fight it. There are issues I can talk about it, but I cannot fight it. But at the same time, there's no point sitting on the bench. So, like if I can, so I am making the books available. So that is why I said, if I'm happy, 100 people have bought it. I mean, can sell 100 titles. But the book is available if somebody wants to pick it up. Also, unlike the established publishers who sort of make a book available, and after a certain time they sort of pulp it and the book is no longer available. I'm trying to keep the book in the market. I'm hoping that few years down the line, a new generation will come up and they will pick up the titles. And also, the idea is, see, poetry, I believe, is always had a smaller market. You cannot compare it fiction or non-fiction. So we cannot compare the same numbers. But there is a dedicated readership, and we need to find that readership, which is scattered. Also what happens is, see, for example, I believe that the poet herself has the ability to find the readers. Normally, what I do, I give a certain number of copies to my poet so they can sell it, because usually people like to get the copies from the poet, the signed copy and everything else. And usually earlier tradition was that you would get a free copy. So I tell my poet that don't give a free copy, but you distribute the copies, you sell it, and you keep the money.
But Divya, why don't you work on your distribution and making like connections? Like I said, we need to strengthen these alternatives, because mainstream publishers are not going to encourage like new poetry. I mean, unless it's like Arvind
And
Krishna
Divya,
Mehrotra, Ranjit Muskote.
I would also like to
Uh,
add there that you've been defensive. Even in your bio, you've said poetry is sacred and we have to keep it like
No, I
a
mean,
rare
see,
art.
I have to,
And also,
yeah,
you say
agree.
that you're working from your bedroom. So you're just being so defensive about being a one-man show, but is that wise? When you talk about the commerce of poetry, there has to be an element of sustainability in your business, right?
Yes, yes.
So
See, I mean,
how would you look at
at
that?
this at this point, since I am the only person and I have a day job, so this is sort of like, I'm so like, whatever money I get from the day job, that is sustaining me. So I'm not thinking about the money part. Also, what happened is, when I started, I approached distributors. They directly said no, because the poetry doesn't sell, and then there is no margin, so they don't want to take it up. So still now, like, we approach bookstores, and bookstores don't want to keep our copies. So that is why, like, despite, like, not liking the idea of selling via Amazon, that's the only source of, like, making the book available. It is not that we are not trying, but nobody is interested in us, because we don't have reached to that level yet. Because you know there is no margin for the bookseller or a distributor for poetry books, so they flatly refuse, like, okay, we are not interested. So what do we do?
But
So
I
but
think
at the same,
like the major publishers have nothing to offer to poets, serious poets, other than the branding. Because I mean, we don't have too many like literary editors who are poetry editors. Also, there are some, because there are some poets who are working as editors in publishing houses, but not. I would say like only 10 to 20% of them can like edit poetry properly. So you don't have you're not going to a publisher for the editing, because most of the time they won't even edit a poetry book unless you're working with a poet editor or someone who understands poetry, who has edited poetry, or who has even translated poetry. So you are not going there for their editorial skills. Then it comes to like marketing. I'm sorry to say, but if your poetry collection that has a print run of 500 copies or maybe even 1,000 copies is being published in the same month as an Amitav Ghosh, Arundhati Roy, and some 5 or 6 commercial fiction writers who have a print run of 50,000, you will not get attention. So marketing is also gone. Then it
yeah,
comes to bookstores. I mean, most of the books are selling on Amazon. I don't know whether you know, but even Crossword Kem's Corner is shutting down.
yeah,
Airport bookstores, they don't stock poetry, and there are so many payment distribution issues. Like, because people are not paying on time because of COVID and because of like losses and all of that. So this whole thing about how, if I publish with a major publisher, my book will be available everywhere. No, many of the bookstores have shut down. There is and the bookstores, especially the retail stores that are still operating, that the space for books has shrunk. I mean, like if you see some of the bookstore chains in the south, or like some other major chain, I don't want to take names. I mean, the
But
space for books has
but
shrunk.
would you say that, would you
So
how
I'm
would you
saying that
compare
don't. I'm
fiction?
saying don't look at independent publishers like poetry, like Paperwall and Copper Coin and Red Rivers as stepping stones. You publish a book with them, and then you say, oh, I want to publish with Random Pen with HarperCollins. No, I mean, you should maybe make some like concerted effort to make these publishing houses self-sustaining. Because I mean,
yeah,
No, but how would you compare, Kanishka? I'm very curious. I mean, you are also dealing with fiction, isn't it, in a big way?
uh,
So, how do you compare? Do you think fiction sells? Do you think it does?
okay, I'll tell
Or is
you.
it a
So
case of brand?
okay, literary fiction, yes. I mean, there is still scope for debut, breakout literary fiction. Literary fiction published, or literary fiction by writers from other parts of the subcontinent, be it Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, will be very hard to sell unless you like a tier 1 name like a Shihan Karunati Laka, or Moni Mohsin, because of distribution issues, payment issues. Even Nepal is a problem. Poetry, I would say, is as hard to sell, maybe harder to sell to publishers as short stories. Short stories भी कोई लेने को तैयार नहीं है. I mean, it's very difficult. So you have to I mean, I take on like in the last 2 years, I took on more poetry than short stories. I took on like one short story every year, and I did 2 or 3 poetry collections. Of course, your classics will sell. Like Arundhati Subram, all the big names like Ranjit, Arundhati, Jeet, and Arvind Krishna,
Isani, Isani.
they will always get takers, because they while they sell consistently, they achieve a decent sales figure over a period of time. And all your classic poetry that will sell, like Rumi, Faiz, the Urdu poets, all of them will
Aga
sell.
Shahid Ali.
Aga Shahid Ali, but yeah, Aga Shahid Ali will sell. In fact, Aga Shahid Ali was also one of the top sellers last year. His most famous book, it was, I think, one of the top sellers last year because I got figures, Nielsen figures from like a friend in publishing. So
So
I'm
would
Rati,
saying
you
you
why?
wanted
say
to make
would
a
you
point.
say
I'm
that
saying
this
why you
problem?
why do you go to a publishing house? Because you are looking for things that you will not find at an independent publisher. You know, but यहाँ पे you will not get anything more than a brand now. And I'm not saying this because I'm like being defensive, because I'm not taking on poetry right now because I will not even get a response from my colleagues in publishing who are getting back to me on like 100 many other things every day. It's just that it's not possible because I mean things have changed now, but there will be no distribution, much of a distribution in bookstores. You will not get enough marketing attention because most of the marketing attention will be given to non-fiction writers, your tier one fiction writers. So best to publish with like poetry presses, but not use them as stepping stones. So
So your
Uh,
advice is very
Rati,
well
you
taken,
wanted to
Ganesh.
Rati
It's
wanted to
very
ask
well
a
taken.
question.
No, I just want to. Vinita, you finish you first. Finish you.
Yes, I
You
was
were
just
asking
saying
something.
that Kanishka's advice is very well taken. We know exactly what he's trying to say. That we have to depend on the small poetry presses, independent poetry presses, rather than the mainstream ones. But when you
yeah.
look at the same, the COVID scene was global, right? It wasn't limited only to India. But poetry is taken much more seriously, and it's respected much more abroad. There, the problem is not this acute. I mean, in India, we have a very specific bracket of poets whose poetry books sell, just like you said. But all the others have to depend on independent poetry presses. So, would you say that poetry has become too much of a lofty art and people can't relate to it, or is it that we have to work to make our work? Poets have to work to make their work sell, work
Uh,
hard to make their work sell.
yeah. So see, there is poetry and there is the poet. So I believe earlier the tradition is you publish a book, and if the book is good, the poems are good, people will pick it up. But now it is not the case. It is the cult of the poet that is more important than the poetry itself. So to a certain extent, that the cult sells. So but I cannot get those cult names, you know uh, so I mean that is impossible, so I have to create a cult
Yeah, so
of
it's like a
so
catch
the
22 situation.
exactly. And then again, coming back to why I'm being defensive myself, again the catch 20 situation. So I don't have any funds. So I mean, like, I can, like, take a loan and, like, invest money and do a business, but I am not sure it will give me a return. And so I cannot afford to do that. I can take the risk. Vinita would know about this poetry publisher. I should mention that because he has been my sort of role model. Bombay Kala, they came up a few years back, and in a very big way, and there are a lot of ambition in this young guy. And, like, he was a friend, I really liked him, and a lot of ambition. But then he went in a big way and could not sustain it. So I don't he has been a big inspiration for me, things that I should not do. If I have to sustain it, I have to remain small. And then, if you talk about independent publishing, I still maintain that I am in the fourth or fifth level. First there is Poetrywala, then there is Copper Coin, then there is Hawakal, then there is Dhauli Books, and there is I am, Red River. So what I'm trying to do is that my focus is the titles that we do, that they stand out. Even if we sell one book, it should be a good book. For now, that has been the uh, strategy. So I mean, like, see, there is a market. I still believe, I mean, like, the pandemic has sort of, like, put a dampener on this. There is a market. Earlier, when in Delhi, when we launch a book, so we make the book available at a discounted price during the launch, and we sort of recover the cost during the
yeah,
launch.
that's a problem because poetry, no, poetry books sell a lot at events, huh?
Yes,
Even
yes,
Bengaluru Poetry Festival.
yes.
I mean, they had good sales, so that's a big disadvantage. That, like, there's a lot of difference between a like a live event and a Zoom thing. So I mean that's a problem.
Mhm.
Mm.
So,
But
Yeah.
I don't see many MNCs, like taking on new poets, like even if they have some sort of a following, unless there are some grants, which is another thing one needs to look at. So we have all the infrastructure in place. We have good poetry, independent poetry presses. We have uh, good platforms like Quarantine Train, even Nether Magazine, which shut down in 2012 or 13. They've also, like, they have now kind of, it's revived, although it's online only. They have a presence. What I'm trying to get at is that all this is not translating to sale. I mean, nahi ho raha hai wo.
yeah, no,
But
and
isn't that
you're right.
strange? I think something very
It-
strange is happening at the same time.
No,
this
it's
is
not
It
the
strange
is
because
same.
I
that
mean,
what is happening is that there is a lot of poetry that is being published in the book form by a certain class of people who have the money. And so it's like vanity publication. A lot of vanity publication is happening. And now that's where a lot of problem also comes up, because how is the sifting done in this kind of publications? Because there could be publications happening with self, kind of with the self in the center, which always is the case, but only for your friends to be the books to be distributed to a certain kind of a circle. But also sometimes it is just so that there is a book to somebody's name,
no, but
just for the
vanity,
hell of
vanity,
it.
vanity publishing applies to everything. It just doesn't apply to poetry. Many publishing houses have customized divisions wherein they are happy to publish anything if you pay them money. Huh? Matlab, obviously, there will be some of them will be more careful about quality control, quality checks, but vanity publishing is happening everywhere. Uh,
But
I,
isn't that something new? I don't think
No, no, it's
till
not.
about 10 years ago this kind of thing was happening.
I
I
think
don't
it's a,
think
it's,
so.
it's a clever marketing move, because I mean many of the self-publishing firms in India, they have not been able to do much with like the books. I mean, they just print the books and then the books are not even available here. You at least get the respectability of a brand, so that happens all the time.
But you see, a few years ago, I remember, and this is quite a few years ago, about 15 years minimum. I remember even literature in translation was not selling in India. It was not selling at all. Today, at least, mainstream publishers are taking in. A lot of translations
I think
are publishing.
Poor
You
Narayan
know,
book did very well actually. The
Which
recent
one?
Poor Narayan translation, the Poor
poetry.
Narayan translation
Yeah,
of
and it
poetry
would
did
have it would have
very
done
well.
better had it not like come out like on the eve of the second wave, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the unfortunate thing with these two books, that the first collection of short stories,
yeah,
his experimental
yes,
stories, which were published under the Modern Classics imprint, that came like just before the first wave, and the poetry collection came out before the second wave. So they are selling the same numbers. Like, I mean, like jo pehle hota tha, it's just that publishers don't want to do like books which will not bring them like enough return, because at the end of the day you have to invest the same time of effort and energy in handling writers, editing their books, making sure that everything is in place. And because of COVID related money issue, they are not prepared to do that. So this will also impact other forms of literary writing and not just poetry. So it'll be very difficult to
Yeah,
sell
So,
reviews.
Kanishka, do you have any figures with
हाँ हाँ
the
बहुत so
literature
आपके आप
exposure?
in the last 2 years I don't think even the Insta poets who were published in India, and keep Rupi Kaur aside because she's selling at another level. Even they haven't sold more than 5,000 copies, despite their 50,000 following on Insta, 100,000 on Insta. There's some poet who recited a poem which got like 2 lakh views, and even his or her poetry hasn't sold more than 3-4 thousand copies. But yeah, all the major names, they continue to sell maybe 2,000 copies, 2,500 copies, but it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a
No,
period of
but
time, sometimes
what
3 years.
about the literature in other languages in India, like Hindi or
Huh. So in
Bengali or
fiction,
Marathi?
it sells as much as like English language. Like a mustache has sold quite a bit. Because it won the JCB prize last year. But a popular work of translation into English will sell as much as like an English language work unless it's like an Arundhati Roy or an Amitav Ghosh or even other big names. Uh,
Yeah,
Yeah, I just
the print run itself is not more
Itself,
than
right? That
Sukrita,
1100 or
I
2000.
know of poetry volumes that have got like 10, 10, 15, 15 reviews, huh? Like they've been covered in like major presses more than once. I mean, I represent these books and they haven't sold like more than 800 copies, 900 copies. Anything that sells over 1000 is good. So I'm saying that it's not as if the sales are very dismal. They're more or less the same. It's just that now the publishers' priorities have changed, and even the ones who had a poetry list or who had like made it a sort of a mission to do at least 2 or 3 original poetry volumes in a year, they are booked up and they are also cutting down on acquisitions. So like, if you why would a poet want to wait for like a big publisher to like publish their poetry collection in 24, 25? It doesn't make sense because they are all booked up, and also because of the backlog, because no publishing could take place for 6 months, 12 months. For some publishers it didn't take place for more than 12 months, so there's a huge backlog. And they're also, because there have been so much losses, they're also trying to put out like the predictable books, the ones that will like bring in the money. Uh, so the whole publishing program has kind of changed, and it has uh, and poetry will suffer. I'm saying literary writing is going to suffer, but of course, I mean, there will be like your people
you're
who are going
looking
to
for
like.
something. You seem to be
No,
looking for
no,
something.
no. I think my charge. No.
So, Divya, a question for you. Tell us, of course, this is a labor of love that you have, and you're doing it very beautifully. You are designing the books very well, that you are making your own selection of who to publish and who not to. I don't think you're publishing everything that you get. So you have your choices, you have the freedom to do it. But tell me, if you were to be seeking support, where would you go? What kind of support are you looking for? And are you making any effort for that support, or are you just leaving it after you publish the book? Do you leave it to the poet to do whatever? Sell the book or not sell the book? But you don't have a distributor, do you?
No, I don't have a distributor, but what my observation is that most people prefer to buy from Amazon, because we also make it
Ah,
available to our seller. I have a seller now in Kalyani Bookshop called Papyrus Bookstore, so they sort of
okay.
sell it on Amazon. But people prefer to buy via Amazon, or if they know the poet, from the poet.
हाँ,
Earlier,
तो
when before the pandemic,
सुकृता अब तो sorry, go on.
uh, you want to say something? Huh. So before the pandemic, it was easier because we could organize a launch with the poet, and then people would come, and a large number
Yeah.
of copies would go immediately, and other copies were available on Amazon. So right now, I am not looking for funds as such. Like, see, I have a job, and that is also a priority for me. I mean, so I'm not looking for fund for two reasons. One is that I cannot focus on this full time, Red River, and second
आपको
is I'm still experimenting. I have not found out, my actual, okay, this is focus. This is what I want
So,
to do.
on that note of experimenting, Divya, where do you see yourself maybe in the next 5 or 6 years?
Probably, see, right now I get queries from some poets, and then I tell them, no, please, I'm not qualified to publish you, please approach a bigger publisher. So probably I can work with them. Also, there are poets that I want to work with, but I cannot approach them, and probably there will be a time when I can approach a poet. Right now, whatever I publish, it came to me. Then I sort of look at it. Okay, this is interesting, and then or my friends, people that I know, you know,
Any,
never approach anybody.
so I want to say one thing that in 2005 when I started Kritya, I thought of publishing. I have almost 500 ISBN number which I got from them, and yes, 500. At that time they were giving so easily.
Okay,
So I am still having
nowadays they
in the
give
name of
10.
I got 500. And but the thing is that that time even Amazon was not popular, and that same problem I find in Kritya, that unless you ask this poet or what to pay money for his printing, at least printing charge.
Yeah.
I cannot publish. I was not able to sell it because selling will become very very difficult. And that why it become the problem is not in a publishing, and a problem is not in a distributing. Problem is that the culture what we are developing. What is the
Yes.
culture we are developing? The culture in a Facebook, I write a poem or I get something, I paste it. I don't care. People come, they don't read your poem, they don't read your anything, and they just like it. I count my like and I'm happy. So that is how we are in this age. This is problem is there, not with the publisher. A publisher will enjoy publishing if he likes publish a book, he will enjoy. But this is the problem. This is the
Yeah.
problem that, and then what happened? You're talking about poetry wall and all the books. Hawakal does not do it, but poetry wall you have to buy 100 books. So if I get, if I ask you to publish, you have to buy. If I buy 100 books, Dibyajyoti can publish easily if my poetry is
This
little
is
bit
you're talking
good.
about poetry wala. I don't think they have this buyback thing. I'm not.
I have published 2 books from
Oh, acha, acha. This must be like.
हेमंत दिवस है हेमंत अरे
Okay,
अभी
okay.
तो बदल गया है वो I do not
Uh,
know now but he has I
no.
have 2 books published from him है ना so
Okay.
he
No,
uh, he respects me a lot so he don't ask that but that is his idea and then everyone bought that's what I know and
no,
then
I
100
agree with you.
uh,
Last year, I published a South Indian gentleman, nice poetry about birds and all that nice illustrations, and the gentleman did not promote the book. He posted in his Facebook once or twice, and we sold a number of copies because
Nahi.
it's a good book. I really like the book, but since the poet did not promote the book, the book sort of died
but
out.
this is
So
humiliating
even
that
even
how I
even
have
this even applies to fiction writers, and even fiction writers and poets who obsessively promote their book, who almost like spam like critics and readers. उनकी भी कई किताबें नहीं बिकती हैं. So I'm just saying that there is no method to this madness. There is no
Yeah, yeah,
secret
that's
sauce.
true.
Like I told you, how can like someone with a following of 50,000 or 100,000 on Insta not even sell 3,000 copies? I think it's the problem of
100
reading it
copies
in a
is
book
slow.
form.
Yes,
So
that is the problem. That is the
But
problem that they don't want to read
yeah.
because because what you are saying is the Vishwas. Who will read Vishwas if he is a Hindi poet? But why? Because वो कुछ और कारण से बिकता है ना? Why not come core narrate? Core narrate if अगर core narrate बिकता है तो मतलब it is for poetry. But if Vishwas is selling means there is some other causes. So
No, but
that is
Vishwas
the
is like, I mean, his two of his books have been the highest selling books
yeah
in the
that there is
poetry
there
space
yeah
last year.
that is
That's what she's
because
trying to say, that why does he sell and why don't the others sell when
Kanishka,
it comes
huh,
to books?
huh.
I wanted to ask a
How do
question
you
to Kanishka.
sift? How do you
So,
sift that distinction between a commercial book, an
Also,
intellectual
just one
book?
thing, my pessimism doesn't apply to the major poets. I mean, I don't want like I'm just talking about like new
Absolutely,
poets.
absolutely. We agree
Yeah,
with
I
you.
mean because they have a huge following and they sell. It's
Absolutely.
just that their books take longer to sell, like the
Yes.
copies because of the genre, but they sell.
but there are outliers. So see, normally since I look at Amazon and the top 100 selling books. So there is a book called Love, Hope and Magic by Ashish Bagrecha.
Uh,
Okay, so this is it's a self-published book, Love, Hope and Magic. I have been seeing this title in Amazon 100 list for last 1 year. It was at
in
one point
poetry, in poetry.
in poetry. So, and I don't
Okay.
know this person.
I
And
know,
since
I know this person rather well, so we'll have this
Yeah,
conversation outside
but
this
before
forum.
I forget, I want to say that we have ready with our Kritya web journal and Kritya web poetry website. We means me actually ready to means what you say na that advertise your publication and any publication related to poetry without any I mean, I don't need any money, but you can, if you
Correct.
want, you can, yes, do that. It because this
Correct. That's
Kritya is
wonderful. I
Kritya
think
is
Yes.
only for poetry.
I
So
think this is the
I
way
will,
one, yeah.
I welcome. Another
Yeah.
thing I want
Yeah.
to say, 100 years back in Kerala, this happened that people were writing. This Karur Neelkantapille and all people were writing, but they were not able to sell it. Then they made it cooperative. The writers made cooperative poetry. So poets also, if they make a cooperative and then they in place of that, I stand in Facebook, please buy my book, nobody will buy.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
Vinita says that they buy Rati's book, it was good, at least 5 people will buy. So that,
Yeah, something like
yeah,
that, Rati, had
Yeah,
happened, you know,
We
clearing
already
house
in,
was
have
I
like
think
that. We have, the
about
Great
clearing house
Indian
was like that.
Poetry Collective.
Yeah, the Great
no,
Indian
also
Poetry.
there was this
In
clearing
in
house.
clearing
Clearing house
house,
was set up.
they
And
they did
clearing
some
house, I
title.
think
Huh.
but it lasted only for about, I think, 2 years
Six
or three
titles.
years. That's it. How
What
many?
was that? Well, I don't know
Six
about
titles.
Clearinghouse.
Clearing
When did
house.
it
No,
start?
no, no. That happened
Kolatkar and
about 20
Mehrota.
years
Oh,
ago.
acha, 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 acha. That was
Uh-huh. So there was R. Parthasarathi and Arvind Malhotra and I think one
Arvind
more.
Kolatkar.
Dilip Chitre, was it? So three
Dilip
people had
Chitre.
got together and they set it up. Yeah.
Dilip
So
Chitra
that
is
was also
almost
out of,
20, 15, 20 years back.
yeah, it's about 20 years ago. So I think
20
what
years ago.
happened was that, that at that point of time, the reason I'm mentioning it is because at that point of time there was a crisis, like there is
Yeah.
it's an all-time crisis actually. But at that time it was realized by poets that our
I,
poetry is not selling, and let us set up a kind of a cooperative, and that was
I would
done.
love for the independent poetry magazines and to set up their own publishing division, even platforms like Almost Island, something like even Nether, even Quarantine Train, and so which is why I'm saying that the pandemic has taken away all the uh, advantages that mainstream publishers had over independent poetry presses. When everything is going to sell on Amazon, most of it at least, and when marketing budgets have cut across genres, even for big names, and when you don't have too many poetry editors in the industry, barring two or three, why do you want to publish with a major publisher? That's my
No,
Yeah,
question.
you're
no
absolutely
need.
right, Kanishka.
You are right.
I think this is
And
something
all these
very,
all these
very,
major publishers, they also have major distribution issues.
yeah,
इनकी किताबें available नहीं होती हैं बहुत जगह पे.
absolutely,
They
absolutely.
struggle to supply books to
Yeah.
like bookstores, retail stores, because they also have this payment issue and these fights with them. Okay, this
Yeah,
person hasn't
yeah.
paid, that distributor hasn't paid, so we are not supplying books to them. So what is the advantage of having a like a major publisher publishing your
Yeah,
poetry book? I mean,
I
those
want to
advantages
put it,
have been taken away. Oh.
yeah,
That's a
but
very
I
good
want to
point,
put it
and
on
you
record
clearly have your
here.
finger
I
on the
think
publishing industry.
it needs to be put on
That's very
record
good
here. My
advice, Kanishka.
personal, I think there's a problem.
So
Yeah.
to sum
So
up,
what I was saying was that, Dibya, I need to basically address this to you because I want to put it on record that just before I published with you a collection, and this is my personal example that I'm giving, I had published one book with a bigger publisher. I don't want to take names, etc. But the kind of satisfaction that I got out of publishing with a relatively, at that time you were
It
almost
was
unknown,
I was
today you are
unknown
more
that time.
known. And I remember the kind of pleasure that I got. It was only to do with the fact that every page was designed with such love and care. And I think to a poet, that is something very wondrous. A poet is not looking for money anyway. But of course, you want readers. That's why you're publishing. And that was a point of frustration for a little while. Well, but then there were people who reached out, and I think we managed to sell some number
We
because
did.
there was also a launch. There
There
was
was
a
a launch.
launch,
Yeah.
and there was a launch, couple of launches actually, and people did buy some copies of Country Drive. And but what I'm talking about is that essential satisfaction that one gets of having published one's poetry, which doesn't go into a factory-like situation into the unknown world. And it gets published out there in the way that it gets published. You don't have much of a control, and whether it
Yeah,
gets
I
sold off
forced
or
you to
not,
come
even
to the
that you
printer.
do not know.
Yeah, I forced you to
Yeah.
come to the printer's place to see the cover.
Yeah,
Remember?
yeah, yeah.
To,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
to
yeah.
approve the
So that
cover.
kind of personal touch and all of that. So three cheers to you and three cheers to all the publishers, small or big. They are great. I mean, people who are publishing poetry, taking a risk in terms of the market, etc. Three cheers, and I think poetry
I
will
mean,
survive
yeah.
because of people like you.
Yeah, I'm thankful. Actually, I'm thankful for the poetry community, because this book that we recently released, Witness, it could not have happened without the support of the community. Because the way, nobody complained that, that we are not giving free copies. Nobody, they understood the predicament, and they supported the project because everybody wanted to be part of it. Everybody is excited to be part of it, and I'm really grateful of the support from the poetry community in India. And I do hope that the support continues.
Sum up, I think we've clearly stated that, very boldly, that it's the commerce of poetry that is driving the poetry industry as far as publishing is concerned. But then we have stalwarts like Dibya, who goes ahead and does his bit without without worrying too much about the whole business of poetry in the market. And we have Kanishka, who gives us very valuable, irrefutable advice to go ahead and print poetry with the small presses, with the independent poetry presses,
Yeah, but
so that
do
you make
try
your
and
presence.
have better distribution, better presence. I mean, you can look for funding. Like I said, I would like many players, and there are many poetry magazines that have been running uh, for many years, and I think they should also look at turning like publishers
At least
again,
like a
because some of
non-profit.
them they were publishing before. So this is what needs to be done. See,
Great,
even pre-COVID, Vinita and Sukrita, I don't want to name publishers, but at least two or three publishers, MNCs, and we don't have more than 7 or 8 MNCs. They had a no poetry policy. You can't send them anything, be it like Sahitya Academy, Gnanpreet, or anything. They don't publish poetry, so it doesn't it's not it's not part of
Yeah,
the list. I mean, like some presses don't publish plays, the poetry was like that. And the ones who are publishing and the ones who are open to at least considering the manuscripts, and again I'm talking about MNCs and I'm talking about new poetry, I'm not talking about the major poets. They will not be in a position to take on new poets. It's uh,
I heard that Raj Kamal is asking 1 lakh rupees for one poetry book. People are giving. I heard
राजकमल
that.
प्रकाशन, हाँ, तो
Uh,
कस्टमाइज तो
uh,
बहुत देर से चल रहा है. वो that applies to all kinds of books. I think they look for at least they want to recover their costs. Again, I'm not talking about Rajkamal because I haven't verified this piece of information, but they would like to recover their printing costs, and then they print another 500 copies, 1,000 copies, which is put out in the market, and then I think it's the brand that people are looking at, that because these publishers are not going to say, this we published this because money was given, and we published this because this is a good book and the author says. So I think it's the
the thing is
paying
that
but
the
how the brand is created. Because what
so
I know that I
uh,
have not known to Dibyajyoti, but I am seeing his two book, and I was thinking that it could be a very big brand because
yeah,
I have not met you that and I because two books I have seen, you know? And when you say that first book didn't sell well, because I think it was not very well explained to poets that they have to buy themselves, because there is some mistake, because my book poem is also there in first volume and even in second volume, but second
Yeah.
volume she is Nabina is very smart to express that how you have to buy. So that
Yeah.
is also that how you put your things, because if I know that I have to buy my book, I will buy certainly, even so that
no,
is
but
another
you should
thing.
maybe publishers like Red River should take risks, and at least make their online presence better,
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
if you
I'm working on that.
But
I'm
what I
working on
like is that
website.
it is slowly spreading, and I think the word
uh,
is going around. It is just that our dear Divyajyoti doesn't want to grow big, he says. But that
Yeah,
with
it's
that
scary
big
to grow
note,
big,
we
because
could
if you grow
probably,
big,
yeah.
if you cannot sustain, then it is easy to fall.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
when you speak of when you gave Bombay Kala as an example of a publishing
Yeah,
house that
yeah,
like published too fast and like tried to grow
yeah.
big too fast. I mean, there's a lot of difference. I mean, that their founder was a student then, and they were
Yeah,
also
yeah, yeah, yes,
publishing many other books. They had an academic division. They were publishing fiction. So mean, I think you should be more positive about your unique position in Indian poetry publishing now, and maybe push for better visibility. Maybe some sort of support grants. I think it's going to happen.
hopefully.
Kanishka,
Yeah.
my book was published by Bombay Kala Books. My
Acha,
poetry
yeah.
book, Two Full Moons, was
Okay.
published by Ishan. And then,
Huh.
of course, I know the story too well, like you
Yeah,
shared.
so I think he was also publishing across genres. He was not only doing poetry. I
Yes,
mean,
he was more
they
interested in the classics like Mark Twain and
no,
Bernard Shaw.
no. They were publishing fiction. They had an academic division, and
Yeah, they're
like
doing a lot of
he
publishing.
doesn't have any experience. Dibya, I mean, Dibya
Yes,
has like learned the
yes.
like tricks of the trade the hard way.
Yeah,
So I
he's
don't
going
think
slow
that
Also,
and
that's
steady.
I think the classical way in which you're going on, I think Red River and Copper Coin and the so-called small, and that's why I'm saying so-called small, because I think the greatness that would come to this particular, it's not going to be thrust upon you, but you will slowly grow into that
yeah.
great domain of being publishers who are committed and dedicated to poetry, and
And
that
there's
is
no harm.
usually
Yeah, there's
very
no
rare.
harm in making a profit if
Yeah,
there's an opportunity. Because I mean,
Yes, of
yeah,
course.
all these publishers are
yeah,
uniquely placed. Like Dibyajyoti, the poet himself, Sarabjit Gacha of Copper Coin. I have dealt with him. I have seen his work. He's very good. Huh? So I mean,
Yes, yes,
obviously, one
yeah,
would want to like work with someone who understands, this genre, who
yeah.
edits it properly. Uh,
So I think we
even
could
Hemant, for
probably end
instance,
with
I mean,
this.
he's a poet turned publisher, so he's also very good, discerning. So
Yeah. So I think
That's
we could
very, very
end with
true.
this wonderful note, which is to do with how poets who are writing poetry are also turning publishers just
but
for the
that
love
happened.
of it.
That happened. That
So
happened in the West also. In the UK, US also it
no, no,
happens.
it's fine. But I think it's happening now in our country much more. And that's
Uh,
a recent phenomenon in English. So,
uh,
of course, there have been poets
all
who
of them,
have
in
been
fact,
published
started
in
out as
other
poets. All
languages.
of them. All
Yeah,
of them. If you
yeah.
look at Dholi, if you look at Red River, even Great Indian Poetry
Yes,
Collective,
yes,
yeah,
while they have
yes,
published like very good poets like Akhil, Urvashi, Rohan. I mean, even the three founders have also published the books. As
yes.
part of the
yeah,
collective. I don't know what that arrangement was, but I mean, all of them, they start out as poets. So,
yeah.
Well,
but
it's
So I
been
think with
great
that
talking to you.
wonderful, yeah, Vinita, I think with that we could probably wind up, because what is absolutely great is that we are ending up with a very, very positive note, despite the fact that we have talked about no market and MNCs not going in for poetry. But the fact of the matter is that we are slowly growing and getting into the market
we
eventually,
have we
and
have
we
all
hope
the
for the best.
infrastructure in place, and who knows, I mean, maybe after COVID, maybe after this whole backlog of books is cleared, publishers may like start acquiring poetry again. I mean, it's an unpredictable as world, as you all know.
Let's
But
end
I
on
have
that
done my
very, very positive.
I like I said, like I feel bad because I mean, for the last 6 or 8 months I have not been looking at poetry submission, and these people are in touch with me, these poets. Some of them are award winners. I don't know what to say, because it's better to say no than to like take them on and then say that I'm not getting a response. Then then what are you doing as an agent if you're not? It's really difficult. But this doesn't apply to your major contemporary poets. It will not apply to translations of classics. But contemporary, for the time being, I have put the submissions on hold. Uh,
It's nice to hear it in black and white, Kanishka. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. All right.
And we wish
Thank you,
and,
thank you,
and we
thank
wish you
you,
all the very
thank
Thank
best.
you so
Uh,
much for
Please
this
continue
yeah,
your
opportunity.
good
thank
work.
Thanks.
so
you.
Thanks.
the last
Yeah.
again, I remind you that any this your kind of publisher, even the bigger also portable, if they want to use Kritya's website and Kritya's page and Kritya's group for the but you have to give that your publicity. You can use free of cost. One thing.
Thank you, Rati.
Second
That's
thing,
very kind of you.
and second thing, I want you people to start a Sehkari Mandal, what that's called in Kerala,
Cooperative.
cooperative society. So that for cooperative society is a group of poets who can help in distributing and express.
There are
Thank
some
you.
platforms that
Thank
came
you.
up during the pandemic that are getting there. I would love to see like Arjun and Quarantine Train like set up a publishing house. I mean, they have a very good network, and I was very impressed with the way they ran this prize, the Dipankar inaugural Dipankar Kilani prize. I mean, so similarly, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but
I have published a couple of poets who are part of the core group of Quarantine Train, like Shobna
No, you
Kumar
were in
or
Kritya
Jyoti
also.
Sarma.
Kritya 20 also you were there.
Yes, yes,
Dibyajyoti,
yes,
you
I
read your
was.
poem there.
So
Oh, by
keep
the way,
going, keep
there's
going.
a new publishing house that has come up, and I think they've published Michel de Costa's poetry. One of the founders
Yeah.
is the well-known
Yamanika
poet and
Press.
translator K. Sri Lata. So I'm forgetting don't remember the
That's
name.
Yamanika Press. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yamani
that's
Kapoor.
also that's
That's
also another
coming
sort
up
of
well.
like a publishing avenue for poets.
Very good. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
They also published
Excellent.
Mustadsir's volume, online volume. The
Okay.
Walk by Mustadsir Dalvi.
Online volume. What's online volume? I mean, they've
Yeah, it's online. Digital.
okay.
There are some many in Hindi actually. I'm going to give my book for this online thing only. No. So
Shall
that is
we
easy.
bring the session to a close and thank both our guests, Dibya, Jyoti, and Kanishka? Thank you so much for making time for this. I think we need to get together on these issues as much as in this context of poetry in the market. And there are lots of things that practically we get to know, and also know that there is joy in publishing, reading, producing books. And the poets essentially don't bother too much about what is happening to the sales, but maybe we need to become a little more conscious so that we can support publishers who are publishing poetry. Thank you very much, Kanishka, and thank you, Dibya. I
Thank
don't
you so
see you,
much for
but
having
thank you
me.
so much. And thank you, Rati. Rati, thank you very much for providing this platform for the
All right.
conversation.
Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.